I should have known something was wrong when Lily insisted on hosting Thanksgiving dinner at their place instead of ours, like we'd done for the past 5 years. Christine had been looking forward to cooking her famous maple-glazed turkey, the recipe her mother had passed down before the fire took everything else away from her. But our daughter-in-law had other plans. Please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what city you're watching from. It'll be so much more convenient in our new kitchen, Lily had said during her phone call 3 weeks earlier, her voice dripping with that particular sweetness she used when she wanted something. Jason and I have so much more space now, and honestly, Christine shouldn't have to stress herself with all that cooking at her age. At her age, Christine was 57, not 77, and could run circles around most women half her age. But I'd learned to pick my battles with Lily over the years. Some fights weren't worth having, or so I thought at the time. The drive to their house in Brookfield took 35 minutes through afternoon traffic. Christine sat beside me in our Honda Civic, wearing the navy blue dress she'd bought specifically for today. She'd spent an hour getting ready, carefully applying foundation to cover the scarred skin on her left cheek and neck, the permanent reminders of the house fire that had nearly killed her 28 years ago. "Do you think she'll actually use the cranberry sauce recipe I gave her?" Christine asked, adjusting her scarf to better hide the textured skin that extended down to her collarbone. "I'm sure she will, honey," I lied. We both knew Lily would serve store-bought everything and take credit for the meal, just like she'd done last Easter with Christine's lemon cake recipe. Their house loomed before us, a massive colonial with perfectly manicured landscaping that screamed money. Jason's promotion to regional manager at the insurance company had been good to them, though I suspected his success had more to do with his wife's networking skills than his actual abilities. Lily had a way of charming the right people, saying the right things, positioning herself and Jason exactly where they needed to be. The front door opened before we could knock. Lily appeared in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her blonde hair swept up in an elaborate style that looked like she'd spent the morning at a salon. "Dean! Christine! So wonderful to see you." She embraced us both with the kind of theatrical warmth that always felt rehearsed. Come in, come in. Jason's in the living room with a beer ready for you, Dean." The house smelled like expensive candles and takeout food disguised as homemade cooking. In the living room, Jason sat in his leather recliner, watching football on their 75-inch television. My son looked up and smiled, but something in his expression seemed strained, like he was performing happiness rather than feeling it. "Hey, Dad." "Mum." He stood to hug us both, but his embrace felt distant, distracted. "How was the drive?" "Fine," I said, accepting the beer he offered. Traffic wasn't too bad for a holiday. We settled into small talk about work, the weather, anything that would fill the awkward spaces between us. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when these visits had become so uncomfortable, but somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being family and started being guests in our own son's life. "Dinner's almost ready," Lily called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that note of stressed cheerfulness that suggested nothing was actually ready. 20 minutes later, we gathered around their dining room table, the one Christine and I had given them as a wedding gift 3 years ago. The meal was exactly what I'd expected. Store-bought turkey, instant mashed potatoes, canned green beans dressed up with almonds to look homemade. But we all pretended it was wonderful, playing our assigned roles in the family theater. "This cranberry sauce is incredible, Lily," Christine said, taking a small bite. "Did you use my recipe?" "Oh, I tweaked it a bit," Lily replied with a wave of her manicured hand. "Added some orange zest and fresh herbs. I thought your version was a little too simple for our guests today." Our guests. As if Christine and I were strangers instead of family. The conversation drifted to Jason's work, their recent vacation to Cabo, the new furniture they'd bought for their bedroom. Normal family topics, but something felt off. Lily kept shooting glances at Christine, her eyes lingering on the faint scarring visible along my wife's jawline, despite the careful makeup application. "Christine, that's such an interesting scarf," Lily said suddenly, her tone shifting to something sharper. "So colorful. Is it new?" "No, I've had it for a while," Christine replied, unconsciously adjusting the fabric around her neck. "It's just so bold for someone with your complexion," Lily continued, and I felt my chest tighten. "I mean, with the way the colors clash with your skin tone. Maybe something in a solid color would be more flattering." Jason looked up from his plate, seemingly oblivious to the tension building across the table. Christine's face flushed, and she touched her scarf again, suddenly self-conscious. "I think Christine looks beautiful," I said firmly, reaching for my wife's hand. "Oh, I'm sure she does her best," Lily replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's just that some people have to work harder to look put together, you know, especially when they have challenges." The word hung in the air like a slap. Challenges. As if Christine's scars were a personal failing, instead of the result of a tragedy that had nearly claimed her life. "What exactly do you mean by challenges?" I asked, my voice low and controlled. "Dean, please," Christine whispered, squeezing my hand. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Lily's smile grew wider, more predatory. "I just think it's important to be realistic about our limitations. Some people are naturally beautiful, and others have to work with what they have. There's no shame in that." She paused, taking a sip of wine before delivering her final blow. "I mean, those burn scars are pretty dramatic. It must be so hard to feel confident when you look in the mirror every morning and see, well, that." The silence that followed was deafening. Christine's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, and I saw her hand tremble as she reached for her water glass. Jason looked confused, as if he hadn't quite processed what his wife had just said. But I heard every word, felt the cruelty behind each syllable. Then Jason laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an uncomfortable chuckle. A genuine laugh, as if his wife had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Oh my God, Lily, you're terrible," he said, still chuckling. "But you're not wrong. I mean, Mum, you could probably benefit from some professional makeup advice. They have specialists now for people with disfigurements." The room began to spin. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball, the man I'd been proud to call my son, had just laughed at his mother's pain and called her disfigured. Christine stood up so suddenly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me," she whispered, and fled toward the bathroom. I stared at my son and daughter-in-law, these people I no longer recognized, and felt something break inside me. The final thread of hope that we could somehow repair our fractured family had just snapped. "How dare you?" I said quietly. "Dad, relax," Jason said, still smiling. "We're just having some fun. Mom knows we love her." Love. They called this love. The front door opened with a sudden bang, and heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. "Sorry I'm late," a man's voice called out. Traffic was murder coming from the airport. Lily's face lit up with genuine excitement for the first time all evening. "Daddy, perfect timing. We were just starting dessert." A tall man in his 60s appeared in the doorway, expensive suit wrinkled from travel, carrying a leather overnight bag. He had Lily's blue eyes and sharp features, but where hers held calculated cruelty, his seemed tired, haunted. "Robert Morrison," he said, extending his hand to me. "Lily's father. You must be Dean and Christine." "Just Dean," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Christine is in the bathroom." "Well, I'm looking forward to meeting her," he said warmly. "Lily's told me so much about—" He stopped mid-sentence as Christine emerged from the hallway, her face composed but her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Robert Morrison took one look at her, and his face went white as sheet. His overnight bag slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. "Oh my God," he whispered, staring at my wife's scarred face with an expression of pure terror. "Oh my God, no, it can't be." Christine froze in the doorway, confused by this stranger's reaction. Robert Morrison's voice cracked as he spoke the words that would change everything. "I know those scars." The dining room fell into a silence so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Robert Morrison stood frozen in the doorway, his face drained of all color, staring at Christine like he'd seen a ghost. His hands trembled as he gripped the doorframe for support. "Daddy?" Lily's voice cut through the tension, confusion replacing the cruel satisfaction she'd worn just moments before. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen—" "I know those scars," Robert repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes never left Christine's face, taking in every detail of the damaged skin along her left cheek and neck. "Dear God, I know exactly how she got them." Christine instinctively raised her hand to her scarf, covering more of her neck. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "I don't think we've ever met." "We haven't," Robert said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "But I know who you are. I know what happened to you." Jason stood up from the table, irritation flashing across his face. "Dad, what's going on? How could you possibly know about Mom's accident? It happened almost 30 years ago in Chicago." "It wasn't an accident," Robert Morrison said, and the words fell into the room like bombs. And it wasn't in Chicago. My blood turned to ice. Christine's fire had happened in a small town called Millbrook, about 2 hours outside Chicago. We'd never told Jason the exact location because Christine found it too painful to discuss. The official reports called it an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring in the basement of her family's rental house. "How do you know where it happened?" I asked, standing slowly. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. Robert Morrison's legs seemed to give out, and he sank into the nearest chair. He buried his face in his hands, and when he looked up, there were tears streaming down his cheeks. "Because I was there," he whispered. "Because I caused it." The room exploded into chaos. Lily gasped and knocked over her wine glass, sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. Jason started shouting questions. I felt Christine grab my arm, her fingers digging into my skin like she was drowning. "That's impossible," Christine said, her voice shaking. "The fire department said it was electrical, bad wiring in the basement. Old house, old wiring, accidents happen." "The fire department was wrong," Robert said, his voice growing stronger as he seemed to find his resolve. "Or maybe they just believed what I told them. I was very convincing back then, very good at making people believe what I needed them to believe." He looked directly at Christine, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. Guilt. Deep, soul-crushing guilt that had been eating him alive for decades. "Your name was Christine Patterson then. You were 28 years old. You lived on Maple Street in Millbrook with your parents, Edward and Margaret Patterson. Your father worked at the grain elevator. Your mother was a seamstress." Christine's face went white. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I was dating your sister, Karen," Robert said simply. "And because I was stealing money from the construction company where I worked, and your father found out." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped ticking. "What sister?" Jason demanded. "Mom doesn't have a sister. Her parents died in the fire. She told us she was an only child." "I had a sister," Christine said quietly, her voice distant and hollow. "Karen was 3 years older than me. She died in the fire too, the whole family except me." Robert Morrison closed his eyes like he was in physical pain. "Karen didn't die in the fire, Christine. She left town with me 3 days before it happened. She was supposed to come back, but when she heard about the fire, about what I'd done..." He trailed off, unable to finish. "What you'd done?" I repeated, my voice deadly quiet. "What exactly did you do?" "I was embezzling money from Morrison Construction, my father's company," Robert said, the words coming out like a confession. "I'd been skimming from job sites for months to pay for Karen's engagement ring for the apartment we were planning to rent in Milwaukee. I thought I could replace it before anyone noticed, but your father was sharper than I gave him credit for." Christine was shaking now, and I moved closer to her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "Edward Patterson came to see me at the job site on a Tuesday morning," Robert continued. "He'd been doing some part-time bookkeeping for smaller contractors, and he'd noticed discrepancies in the invoices. He knew I was stealing, and he said he was going to tell my father unless I returned every penny by Friday." "So you killed him?" The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. "No," Robert said quickly. "I never intended to hurt anyone. I just wanted to scare him, make him back off. I knew the family would be at church that Wednesday night for the special service. I planned to break into the house, make it look like a burglary, steal some things to make it convincing. Then I was going to plant evidence that would make Edward look like he was involved in something shady, discredit him before he could expose me." "But something went wrong," Christine said, and it wasn't a question. "I was nervous, clumsy. I'd never broken into anything before," Robert admitted. "I was searching through your father's desk in the basement when I knocked over a lamp. It shattered against the electrical panel and sparked. The old wiring caught fire immediately." He paused, staring at his hands. "I panicked. I should have called the fire department immediately, but all I could think about was getting out before anyone saw me. By the time I realized how fast the fire was spreading, it was too late to go back." "You left my family to die," Christine said, her voice barely audible. "I thought the house was empty," Robert said desperately. "Karen told me you were all going to church together. I had no idea you'd stayed home with the flu." "My parents and grandmother came home early because I was sick," Christine said, the words coming out mechanical and lifeless. "They walked into a house full of smoke and flames, trying to find me. The stairs collapsed while they were searching the second floor. I was trapped in the basement until the firefighters pulled me out. She touched her scars unconsciously. The burning beams fell on me while I was trying to crawl to the window. I spent 8 months in the burn unit. When I got out, I had nothing. No family, no home, no money for college. I was completely alone. I know, Robert whispered. I followed the news coverage. I knew you'd survived, and I knew you had no one left. I wanted to help, to send money anonymously. But Karen said it was too risky. She said if anyone connected me to the fire, it would destroy both our lives. So you just walked away, I said, anger building in my chest like pressure in a boiler. You took a sister and left her with nothing. We moved to Milwaukee first, then Minneapolis, then eventually here, Robert said. I used my inheritance to start a new construction company. Karen and I got married 6 months later. We told everyone we met that we were from Iowa, that we'd never lived anywhere else. Lily had been sitting in stunned silence, but now she found her voice. This is insane. Daddy, tell them this is some kind of mistake. Tell them you're confused. There's no mistake, Robert said sadly. I've been carrying this guilt for 28 years. Do you think I could ever forget the face of the woman whose life I destroyed? But you told me Karen died in a car accident when I was little, Lily said, her voice rising. You said that's why you never remarried. Karen did die, Robert said quietly. 3 years after we moved here, she couldn't live with what we'd done. The guilt ate her alive. She started drinking, taking pills. One night she drove her car into a tree on purpose. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Lily looked like she might faint. Jason stared at his father-in-law with his mouth open. Christine swayed against me, and I tightened my grip on her shoulders. She left a note, Robert continued. She said she couldn't stop seeing Christine's face in her dreams, couldn't stop thinking about how we'd abandoned her when she needed family the most. The guilt killed her as surely as if she'd died in that fire. Stop, Lily said suddenly, her voice sharp and panicked. Just stop talking. This is ridiculous. Even if any of this is true, which I doubt, it was almost 30 years ago. People make mistakes. You can't hold someone responsible forever for an accident. It wasn't an accident, Robert said firmly. It was criminal negligence at best, and I've spent every day since then knowing I should have been in prison, instead of building a life on the foundation of your family's tragedy. He looked at Christine with eyes full of tears. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I took from you can never be replaced, but I need you to know that not a day has passed when I haven't thought about you, wondered if you were okay, wished I could undo what I did. Christine stood up slowly, her composure finally cracking completely. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. You're right, she said quietly. Some things can never be undone. She turned to look at Lily, then at Jason, then back at Robert. But I need to know something. Did your daughter know? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Robert Morrison's face crumpled, and in that moment, I knew the answer before he spoke. Lily, he said quietly, tell them the truth. Our daughter-in-law's face had gone from pale to grey. Her hands shook as she reached for her wine glass, but there was nothing left to drink. Tell them what truth, Daddy, she whispered. Tell them how long you've known exactly who Christine was. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire ready to snap. Lily's face had gone from grey to ashen, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. The confident, cruel woman who had been mocking my wife's scars just minutes earlier had transformed into something smaller, more desperate. I don't know what you're talking about, Daddy, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The words came out hollow and rehearsed like she'd practiced this denial but never believed she'd need to use it. Robert Morrison stared at his daughter with a mixture of disappointment and resignation that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd caught her in a lie. Lily, please, we're past the point of pretending now. Tell them what? Jason demanded, looking back and forth between his wife and father-in-law. Somebody explain what's going on here because I'm completely lost. I felt Christine lean heavier against me, and I could hear her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. 28 years of believing her family's death was a tragic accident, and now this. The foundation of everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling beneath her feet. Sit down, honey, I whispered, guiding her back to her chair. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. Robert Morrison reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a small, worn photograph that looked like it had been handled thousands of times over the years. He placed it on the table where we could all see it. It was a picture of a young woman with Christine's eyes and smile, but without the scars. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her head thrown back in pure joy. Written on the back in faded ink were the words, Karen Patterson, age 24, Millbrook, 1995. "I kept this," Robert said quietly. "Karen gave it to me right before everything fell apart. She said it was so I'd remember what happiness looked like." Christine reached for the photograph with shaking hands. "She was so beautiful," she whispered. "I'd forgotten how beautiful she was when she laughed." "She looked just like you," Robert said. "Before the fire, you two could have been twins." That's what made it so hard for Lily to pretend she didn't know. All eyes turned to Lily, who was now pressing herself back in her chair like she wanted to disappear through the wall behind her. "I still don't understand," Jason said, frustration clear in his voice. "How would Lily know anything about Mom's family? They died before we even met." "Because 3 years ago, when you first brought Christine to meet us, I recognized her immediately," Robert said. The scars had changed her face, but her eyes, her voice, the way she moved her hands when she talked, it was like seeing Karen's ghost. He turned to Lily. "I told you that night after they left. Remember, I was having a panic attack in the kitchen and you kept asking what was wrong. I broke down and told you everything. About the fire, about Karen, about what I'd done to Christine's family." "No," Lily said, but the word came out as barely a whisper. "Yes," Robert continued, his voice growing stronger. "I told you because I couldn't carry the secret alone anymore. I said I needed to confess, to make amends somehow. I said I was going to tell Christine the truth and try to help her however I could." "And what did you say to that?" I asked Lily, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. Robert looked at his daughter with obvious pain. "She convinced me it would be cruel to dredge up the past. She said telling Christine would only cause her more pain, that it was selfish of me to want to confess just to make myself feel better." "That's good advice," Jason said defensively. "Why make things worse by bringing up old tragedies?" "Because it wasn't advice," Robert said sadly. "It was manipulation. Lily didn't want me to confess because she was already planning to use the information herself." The room went dead silent, except for the sound of Christine's sharp intake of breath. "Use it how?" I asked, though the pieces were already falling into place in my mind like dominoes. "Tell them, Lily," Robert said. "Tell them about the research you did, about the private investigator you hired." Lily's composure finally cracked completely. "I don't have to explain myself to any of you," she said, her voice rising to a near shriek. "This is my house and I want you all to leave, now." "No," Christine said, and her voice was steady for the first time since this nightmare began. "I want to hear this. All of it." Robert continued, as if Lily hadn't spoken. "She hired a private investigator to dig up everything about Christine's past. Medical records, insurance settlements, psychological evaluations from after the fire. She wanted to know exactly how damaged you were, how vulnerable. Why?" The word came out of me like a growl. "Because she was planning Jason's future," Robert said. "She saw Christine as a potential obstacle to their success, their social climbing. She wanted to know exactly how to neutralize any influence you might have over your son." "That's not true," Jason said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at his wife like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "Isn't it?" Robert asked. "Tell me, Jason, how many times has Lily suggested that your mother was emotionally unstable? How many times has she mentioned Christine's trauma or damage when you were making family decisions?" I watched Jason's face change as the memories came flooding back. Every holiday that had been moved to their house instead of ours. Every family gathering where Christine had been subtly excluded or marginalized. Every casual comment about Christine's mental health, her reliability, her ability to handle stress. "She knew," Christine said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. "She knew exactly who I was and what happened to my family, and she used it against me." "For 3 years, Robert confirmed. "Every cruel comment, every slight, every way she made you feel unwelcome or inadequate. It was all calculated. She knew your psychological weak points because she'd studied them." "The scars," I said, understanding flooding through me. "Tonight wasn't random cruelty. She knew exactly how much those comments would hurt. She's been building to this for months," Robert said. "Testing boundaries, seeing how much abuse Christine would tolerate, how much you would let slide to keep peace in the family." Lily suddenly stood up, her chair clattering backward. "So what if I did?" she screamed. "So what if I knew? She's weak. She's damaged. She's dragged this family down with her pathetic neediness and her constant victim mentality. The mask was completely off now. The sweet, manipulative daughter-in-law was gone, replaced by something vicious and calculating. "Do you have any idea what it's been like having her as a mother-in-law?" Lily continued, her voice rising higher. "Always wanting to cook for us, always trying to give advice, always acting like she knows what's best for Jason. She's a burned-up nobody who never accomplished anything in her life except surviving something that happened 30 years ago." "Lily, stop," Jason said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. "No, I won't stop," she shouted. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of acting like we're lucky to have her in our lives. She's an embarrassment. Look at her. Those scars, that tragic backstory, the way she jumps every time someone raises their voice. She makes everyone around her uncomfortable, and we're all supposed to pretend otherwise because feeling sorry for her makes us good people." Each word hit Christine like a physical blow. I could see her shrinking into herself, all the confidence and strength I'd watched her build over our 15 years of marriage evaporating under this assault. "You want to know the truth?" Lily continued, pointing at Christine with a shaking finger. "I've been trying to get rid of you from the moment Jason brought you to meet us. I knew if I could make you miserable enough, you'd eventually stop coming around. Then Jason could have a normal family life without having to explain why his mother looks like a horror movie victim." "That's enough," I said, standing up. My voice was quiet, but something in my tone made Lily take a step backward. "The truth is enough?" She laughed hysterically. Finally someone in this family is willing to tell the truth instead of tiptoeing around the damaged bird in the corner." "The truth," I said, taking a step toward her, "is that you're a sociopath who has spent 3 years psychologically torturing a woman whose only crime was surviving a fire that your father caused." "Allegedly caused," Lily shot back. "We only have his word for any of this. He's been telling tall tales his whole life to make himself seem more interesting." "I have proof," Robert said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to stare at him. "I kept Karen's suicide note," he continued. "She wrote down everything, every detail of what we did, what we covered up, how we abandoned Christine. She wanted there to be a record in case anything ever happened to me, in case the truth needed to come out someday." He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his photos. "I photographed every page before I put the original in my safety deposit box. I've been carrying this guilt for 28 years, and I think it's time for it to see daylight." "Don't you dare," Lily hissed. "Don't you dare destroy our family over some ancient history." "What family?" Christine asked, and her voice was stronger now, clearer. "What family are you protecting, Lily? The one where you spend 3 years studying my trauma so you could weaponize it against me? The one where you turn my own son against me? The one where you mock my scars at dinner parties?" She stood up slowly, and I could see something changing in her posture, her expression. The broken woman who had fled to the bathroom was gone. In her place was someone I'd never seen before, Christine Patterson, the survivor who had crawled out of a burning house with half her body destroyed and built a new life from nothing. "You want to know what's really pathetic, Lily?" Christine said, her voice steady and cold. "It's not the woman who survived a fire that killed her entire family. It's not the woman who spent 8 months in a burn unit and came out grateful to be alive. It's the woman who has so little worth of her own that she has to tear down others to feel powerful." "How dare you?" Lily started. "I'm not finished," Christine interrupted, and something in her voice made Lily's mouth snap shut. "You studied my medical records, you know what I went through, but do you know what the doctors told me in that burn unit?" She stepped closer to Lily, unafraid for the first time in 3 years. "They told me that my survival rate was less than 10%. They told me that most people with burns covering 40% of their body don't make it past the first week. They told me that the combination of smoke inhalation and thermal trauma should have killed me 3 times over." Christine's voice grew stronger with each word. "But I didn't die. I fought through 8 surgeries, months of infection, skin grafts that failed and had to be redone. I learned to walk again, to use my hands again, to speak clearly despite the damage to my throat. I rebuilt myself from nothing because I was too stubborn to quit." She was standing directly in front of Lily now, close enough that our daughter-in-law had to look up to meet her eyes. "So when you call me weak, when you call me damaged, when you mock these scars, you're not insulting a victim, you're insulting a woman who refused to die when dying would have been easier. You're insulting someone who has more strength in her scarred little finger than you have in your entire perfectly preserved body." The silence that followed was absolute. Lily stood frozen, her mouth open, apparently unable to form words. "And now," Christine continued, "you're going to learn exactly what happens when you pick a fight with someone who has already survived the worst thing that could ever happen to her." Jason sat in his chair like a man watching his world collapse in slow motion. His face had gone pale, and his hands gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles had turned white. For the first time in 3 years, he was seeing his wife without the filter of manipulation she'd carefully constructed around him. "This can't be real," he said quietly. "Lily, tell me this isn't real." But Lily was staring at Christine with a mixture of fear and rage that made her look almost feral. The careful mask of suburban perfection had been stripped away completely, revealing something ugly underneath. "It doesn't matter if it's real," she said, her voice shaking. "None of this changes anything. Your mother is still damaged goods. My father's guilt doesn't make her any less of a burden on this family." "Burden," Jason repeated, and I heard something crack in his voice. "Yes, burden," Lily snapped, spinning around to face her husband. "Do you think I enjoyed pretending to care about her feelings? Do you think I liked having to walk on eggshells every time we had family dinner because we might accidentally mention something that would trigger her trauma?" She gestured wildly at Christine. "Look at her, Jason. Really look at her. When was the last time we could take her anywhere without people staring? When was the last time we had a normal family photo where we didn't have to worry about the angle to hide her scars?" "Jesus Christ, Lily," Jason breathed. "Don't you dare act shocked," she continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "You've been thinking the same things. I've heard you complain about having to accommodate her issues. I've seen you roll your eyes when she gets emotional about family traditions. I've watched you choose our social calendar over visiting your parents because you didn't want to deal with her neediness." Each accusation hit Jason like a physical blow. I could see him remembering every conversation, every moment when he'd chosen convenience over family, every time he'd let Lily's subtle manipulations guide his decisions. "That's not... I never meant..." he started, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Yes, you did," Lily said cruelly. "You just didn't have the courage to admit it out loud. I've been doing the dirty work for both of us, being the bad guy so you could keep pretending to be a loving son while secretly wishing your mother would just disappear." "Stop," Jason said, but his voice was weak. "Why should I stop?" Lily demanded. "Because the truth hurts? Because you don't want to face what you really are? You've been using me as a buffer between you and your parents for 3 years, letting me handle all the uncomfortable conversations, letting me be the reason for every cancelled visit and missed holiday." She pointed at Christine. "You wanted distance from her just as much as I did. The only difference is I had the honesty to say it out loud." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Jason's labored breathing. I watched my son struggle with the weight of his wife's words, and I could see in his face that at least some of what she was saying had hit home. "Is that true?" Christine asked quietly. "Jason, is that how you really feel about me?" Jason looked up at his mother, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to her with scraped knees and broken toys. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by something harder, more defensive. "It's complicated, Mom," he said, and those 3 words broke my heart more than anything Lily had screamed. "No," Christine said, her voice steady. "It's really not complicated at all. Either you love me despite my scars, or you don't. Either I'm your mother who deserves respect, or I'm an embarrassment you wish you could hide. You don't understand the pressure we're under," Jason said, and I could hear Lily's influence in every word. "My job, our social circle, the impression we need to make. Image matters in our world." "Our world," I repeated. "And where exactly do your mother and I fit in this world of yours?" Jason couldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, please. I love you both. But you have to understand that things are different now. We have different priorities, different responsibilities." "Like what?" Christine asked. "What responsibilities are more important than family?" "Our future," Jason exploded, finally showing some emotion. "Our careers, our social standing, our reputation in the community. Do you know how hard it's been trying to build a professional network when people remember you as the guy whose mother has facial deformities?" The words hung in the air like poison. Christine took a step backward as if she'd been slapped. "Facial deformities," she repeated quietly. "I didn't mean it like that," Jason said quickly, but the damage was done. "Yes, you did," I said, standing up. "That's exactly how you meant it. Your mother, the woman who survived a fire that killed her entire family, the woman who fought through months of agony to rebuild her life, is an embarrassment to you because she doesn't look perfect enough for your country club friends. You don't understand, Jason said desperately. It's not about the scars themselves. It's about how people react to them. It's about the questions, the stares, the way conversations stop when she walks into a room. So your solution was to just cut her out of your life? I asked. We didn't cut her out, Lily interjected. We just managed the situation. Limited exposure, controlled the narrative. Controlled the narrative, Robert Morrison said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. That's exactly what I did 28 years ago. I told myself I was protecting Karen, protecting our future, managing a difficult situation. Do you know what that narrative control cost me? He looked at Lily with eyes full of pain. It cost me my soul. It cost Karen her life, and it cost Christine her family twice. Once in the fire and again when we abandoned her to save ourselves. This is different, Lily said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, it's not, Robert replied. It's exactly the same. You're sacrificing an innocent person to protect your own comfort, and you're convincing yourself it's justified because she's already damaged. She is damaged, Lily screamed. Look at her. She can't go 5 minutes without touching those scars. She flinches every time someone raises their voice. She cries at family movies. She's broken, and broken people drag everyone else down with them. That's enough, I said, my voice low and dangerous. No, it's not enough, Lily shot back. I'm tired of pretending this is normal. I'm tired of acting like having a mother-in-law who looks like she escaped from a horror movie is just something we have to accept. She turned to Jason. Do you want our children to grow up embarrassed by their grandmother? Do you want them to have to explain to their friends why grandma looks like a monster? The word monster hit the room like a bomb. Christine made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach, and I saw her legs give out. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair. All the fight suddenly drained out of her. Monster, she whispered. Jason stared at his wife in horror. Lily, you can't say things like that. Why not? Lily demanded. It's what everyone thinks. It's what you think. I'm just the only one honest enough to say it. That's not true, Jason said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. Isn't it? Lily challenged. When was the last time you willingly introduced your mother to someone new? When was the last time you took her to a work function or a social event? When was the last time you posted a family photo with her in it on social media? Jason opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The silence stretched between us as he realized he couldn't answer any of those questions. You see, Lily said triumphantly, you've been hiding her just as much as I have. The only difference is I'm honest about why. Stop, Christine said quietly. No, I won't stop, Lily continued, sensing victory. I won't stop until everyone in this room admits the truth. Your mother is a burden. She's damaged. She's holding this family back from reaching its potential. And deep down, Jason, you know I'm right. I said stop, Christine repeated, and this time her voice carried a note that made everyone in the room turn to look at her. She stood up slowly, and I could see something had changed in her face. The broken woman who had been reeling from Lily's verbal assault was gone. In her place was someone harder, stronger, angrier than I'd ever seen. You want honesty, Lily? Christine asked, her voice deadly calm. Let me give you some honesty. She walked over to where her purse sat on the counter and pulled out her phone. I've been recording this entire conversation, she said, holding up the device. Every word, every accusation, every moment of cruelty, all of it. Lily's face went white. You can't do that. This is a private conversation. In a state where only one party needs to consent to recording, Christine replied. I looked it up before we came here tonight. I had a feeling something like this might happen. You planned this? Jason asked, confusion clear in his voice. I planned to protect myself, Christine said. I've been documenting Lily's behavior for months. The comments, the exclusions, the subtle cruelties. I knew eventually she'd show her true colors, and I wanted evidence. She looked around the room at all of us. Did you really think I was too damaged to notice what was happening? Too broken to understand that I was being systematically isolated from my own family? Mom, Jason started. Don't, Christine cut him off. Don't call me Mom. Monsters don't get to be mothers, remember? Jason flinched like he'd been hit. Christine continued, her voice growing stronger. I survived a fire that killed my entire family. I spent 8 months in a burn unit learning to walk again. I rebuilt my life from nothing, with no help from anyone. And you think I'm too weak to handle a spoiled brat with a psychology degree trying to manipulate my own son against me? She looked directly at Lily. You made one crucial mistake in all your research and planning. You assumed that surviving trauma makes someone weak. But trauma doesn't break strong people. It just shows them exactly how strong they really are. What are you going to do with that recording? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Christine smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen on her face. I'm going to give you all exactly what you wanted, she said. Complete freedom from the burden of having me in your lives. She looked at Jason. You want to choose your image over your family? Fine. Choose. But understand that this choice is permanent. There's no coming back from calling your mother a monster. The room fell silent as we all realized we'd reached the point of no return. Whatever happened next would determine whether this family had any chance of survival, or whether Lily's poison had finally killed everything we'd once been to each other. Jason sat in his chair, staring at his hands, the weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. I need you to choose, Jason, Christine said quietly. Right now. Choose the life you want because you can't have both. Jason sat frozen in his chair for what felt like an eternity, his face cycling through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. Confusion, fear, anger, and something that might have been grief all flickered across his features as he stared at his hands. The weight of Christine's ultimatum hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. You can't make me choose, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. That's not fair. Fair? Christine laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Was it fair when your wife spent 3 years psychologically torturing me? Was it fair when you laughed at my scars? Was it fair when you called me a monster? I didn't call you that, Jason protested weakly. Lily did. And you didn't correct her, I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. You didn't defend your mother. You didn't even try to stop your wife from verbally abusing the woman who gave birth to you. Jason's head snapped up, and for the first time I saw real anger in his eyes. Don't you dare lecture me about loyalty, Dad. Where were you when all this was happening? You sat right there and let it happen too. The accusation hit me like a physical blow because it was partially true. I had seen the signs, felt the growing tension, noticed how Christine had become quieter and more withdrawn after family gatherings, but I told myself it was just personality conflicts, normal family friction that would work itself out over time. You're right, I said quietly. I failed her too. I should have confronted this years ago instead of hoping it would get better on its own. At least you can admit your mistakes, Christine said, looking at me with something that might have been forgiveness. That's more than your son seems capable of. This is insane, Lily interjected, apparently recovering some of her composure. We're all acting like I'm some kind of villain for having realistic expectations about family dynamics. Not everyone can handle being around severely disfigured people. It's a normal human reaction. Normal human reaction, Robert Morrison repeated, and his voice was filled with disgust. That's exactly what I told myself 28 years ago. It's normal to want to protect yourself. It's normal to prioritize your own comfort. It's normal to sacrifice someone else for your own benefit. He stood up and walked over to where Lily stood, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. Do you know what happened to your mother after we moved away? He asked. She died in a car accident, Lily said automatically. You told me... She killed herself, Robert cut her off. 3 years of carrying the guilt of what we'd done to Christine. 3 years of knowing we'd abandoned a young woman who'd lost everything. 3 years of living with the knowledge that we'd chosen our own comfort over basic human decency. It ate her alive. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his photos again. You want to see normal human reactions? Here's what your mother wrote before she drove her car into that tree. He began reading from the screen, his voice shaking with emotion. I can't sleep anymore. I can't stop seeing that girl's face, wondering if she's okay, wondering if she has anyone to help her. We could have been her family. We could have helped her heal. Instead, we took her sister and left her with nothing. I'm a coward and a monster, and I can't live with what we've done. Lily's face had gone white, but she lifted her chin defiantly. That was her choice, her guilt, not mine. Your mother left instructions in that note, Robert continued. She wanted me to find Christine, to make amends somehow, to help her any way we could. She said if anything ever happened to her, I had to promise to make things right. He looked directly at his daughter. I spent 28 years being too much of a coward to honor that promise. But I won't let you destroy another innocent person the way we destroyed your mother. Destroyed? Lily laughed harshly. I didn't destroy anyone. I'm trying to build a successful life for my family. I'm trying to protect my husband's career and our social standing. Those things matter in the real world. More than basic human decency? Christine asked quietly. Yes, Lily shouted. Yes, they matter more than coddling someone who should have dealt with her trauma decades ago. You've been using those scars as an excuse to be weak and needy for almost 30 years. When is enough enough? The silence that followed was absolute. Even Jason looked shocked by his wife's vehemence. You think I use my scars as an excuse? Christine asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I think you use them as a weapon, Lily replied. Poor Christine, the tragic burn victim. Everyone has to be extra nice to her, extra careful around her, extra considerate of her feelings because she's been through so much trauma. She gestured around the room. Look at this family. Everyone walking on eggshells. Everyone afraid to say what they really think, because we might hurt the delicate flower's feelings. It's emotional manipulation, pure and simple. Emotional manipulation, I repeated, standing up. You mean like spending 3 years researching someone's trauma specifically so you could use it to hurt them? You mean like turning a son against his mother through calculated psychological abuse? I prefer to call it strategic relationship management, Lily said with a cold smile, and it worked perfectly until tonight. Jason finally found his voice. Strategic relationship management? Is that what you call our marriage? Our marriage is fine, Lily said dismissively. This is about setting appropriate boundaries with toxic family members. Toxic? Jason's voice was rising now. You're calling my mother toxic. I'm calling this whole dynamic toxic, Lily replied. The guilt, the obligation, the constant need to accommodate someone else's psychological issues. Normal families don't operate this way, Jason. Normal families don't center their entire existence around one person's trauma. Normal families don't abandon burn victims either, Robert said quietly. Oh, spare me the guilt trip, Daddy, Lily snapped. What happened to her was unfortunate, but it wasn't our responsibility to fix her life. We don't owe her anything. We owe her everything, Robert exploded. I caused that fire, I destroyed her family, I left her to die. That was your choice, not mine, Lily said coldly. I had nothing to do with what happened 30 years ago, and I refuse to sacrifice my family's future for your guilt. Your family's future, Christine said, and something in her voice made everyone turn to look at her. Let's talk about your family's future, Lily. She held up her phone again. This recording is going to be very interesting to a lot of people. Your husband's employer, for instance. Insurance companies take a very dim view of executives whose families are involved in scandals. You wouldn't dare, Lily breathed. Your country club friends, Christine continued, the charity boards you serve on, the PTA at your kids' school when you have them, social media, local news stations. I'm sure they'd all be fascinated to hear about the woman who spent 3 years psychologically torturing a burn victim. You can't do that, Jason said, panic creeping into his voice. That would destroy our reputation. Your reputation, Christine said. Not mine. I have nothing left to lose, remember. I'm just the damaged monster who's been holding your family back. She looked around the room at all of us. You all seem to think I'm weak, that I'm broken, that I can't handle the real world, but you've forgotten something important. What's that? Lily asked, though her voice was shaking now. I've already lost everything once, Christine said. My family, my home, my face, my entire identity. I spent 8 months learning how to be human again, how to function in a world that stares at me like I'm a freak show. Do you really think anything you can do to me now compares to that? She walked over to where Jason sat and looked down at him. I rebuilt my life from ashes once before. I can do it again if I have to. But you've never faced real hardship. You've never had to fight for anything. You've lived your entire adult life in a bubble of privilege and comfort. What are you saying? Jason asked. I'm saying that if you choose your image over your family, you're going to find out exactly how fragile that image really is, Christine replied. And when it all comes crashing down, when your friends abandon you and your career implodes and your perfect life turns to dust, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember the choice you made. Are you threatening us? Lily demanded. I'm educating you, Christine said, about consequences, about what happens when you build your life on lies and cruelty. She turned to Robert Morrison. Your father knows all about consequences, don't you, Robert? Tell them what happened to your construction business in Milwaukee. Robert's face crumpled. It failed within 2 years. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't sleep, couldn't make good decisions. The guilt was eating me alive, and it showed in everything I did. And the one in Minneapolis, Christine continued? Bankruptcy, Robert whispered. I kept making the same mistakes, kept seeing your face in my dreams, kept wondering if you were okay. I couldn't function knowing what I'd done. And here in Portland? Success built on a foundation of lies, Robert said. Every contract I signed, every building I constructed, every dollar I made was tainted by what I'd done to your family. It never felt real, never felt earned. He looked at Lily with tears in his eyes. That's what guilt does, sweetheart. It poisons everything. It turns success into shame and prosperity into prison. I don't feel guilty, Lily said defiantly. I feel justified. Everything I did was to protect my family. Then you're about to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between justification and justice, Christine said. She walked to the front door and put her hand on the knob. I'm leaving now. Jason, you have 24 hours to decide what kind of man you want to be. Do you want to be the son who stood by his mother, or do you want to be the man who chose social status over family? Mom, wait, Jason called out, finally standing up. Don't, Christine said without turning around. Don't make this harder than it already is. You've heard everything you need to hear. You know exactly who your wife is and what she's capable of. You know exactly what she thinks of your mother and what she's been doing to our family. She opened the door and looked back one last time. Choose wisely, Jason, because some choices can't be undone. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. I looked around the room at the wreckage of our family. Lily stood defiant but shaking. Robert Morrison sat with his head in his hands. Jason stared at the door his mother had just walked through, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Well, I said quietly, reaching for my coat, I hope it was worth it. Dad? Wait, Jason called out as I headed for the door. No, son, I said without stopping. Your mother gave you a choice to make, but I don't need 24 hours. I made my choice the moment you laughed at her scars. I walked out into the cold November night, leaving behind the son I'd raised and the family we'd once been. In the distance, I could see Christine sitting in our car waiting for me, waiting to see if I would choose her over the comfortable lies that had destroyed us all. For the first time in 3 years, the choice was easy. 3 months later, I was washing dishes in our kitchen when Christine walked in with an envelope in her hands and a smile I hadn't seen in years. The winter sun streamed through our windows, highlighting the scars on her face in a way that somehow made them look like badges of honor rather than marks of tragedy. It's done, she said simply, setting the envelope on the counter. I dried my hands and turned to face her. The divorce papers. Signed and filed this morning, she confirmed. Jason's lawyer tried to negotiate until the very end, but there's no negotiating with recorded evidence. The 3 months since Thanksgiving had been a whirlwind of legal activity, media attention, and family reconstruction. Christine had been right about the power of truth. Within a week of her releasing the recording, Jason's life had begun to unravel exactly as she'd predicted. His insurance company had launched an investigation into his moral character after the recording went viral on social media. The country club had quietly asked him to resign his membership. 3 major clients had cancelled their policies, citing concerns about being associated with his family's scandal. But the real blow had come from an unexpected source. Robert called this morning, Christine said, sitting down at our kitchen table. The DNA test results came back. I joined her at the table, taking her scarred hand in mine. And 99.7% probability that he's my biological father, she said quietly. The revelation had come 2 months earlier, during one of our conversations with Robert Morrison. He'd been sharing more details about his relationship with Karen, trying to piece together the timeline of events around the fire when something had clicked. The dates don't match, Christine had said during one of our meetings. If Karen was my sister and she was 3 years older than me, she would have been 24 when I was 21. But in the photo, she looked exactly like I did at 28. Robert had gone very quiet, then asked when Christine's birthday was. When she'd told him, he'd done some quick calculations and gone white as a sheet. I think Karen might have been your mother, not your sister, he'd whispered. The revelation had explained so much. Why Christine looked exactly like Karen. Why her parents had always seemed uncomfortable when she asked about her birth. Why there were no baby pictures of her in the family albums. Why the family had moved to Millbrook when she was 3 years old, around the time a teenage girl might have given birth and needed to disappear for a while. She was 16 when she had me, Christine said now, staring at the DNA results. Just a kid herself. Edward and Margaret weren't my parents. They were my grandparents, raising their daughter's baby as their own to avoid the scandal. And Robert is your father, I said. My father who caused the fire that killed the people who raised me and left me for dead, Christine said. But there was no bitterness in her voice anymore, just a kind of weary acceptance. The truth had been devastating and liberating at the same time. Devastating because it meant Robert Morrison had abandoned his own daughter twice, once when Karen became pregnant, and again when he left her to die in the fire. Liberating because it finally explained the guilt that had driven Karen to suicide and Robert to a lifetime of self-destruction. He wants to make amends, Christine continued. He's put his construction company up for sale, says he wants to give me half the proceeds, plus establish a foundation for burn survivors. How do you feel about that? Christine was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the raised skin along her jawline. I feel like I finally understand why I survived, she said. All those doctors who said I shouldn't have made it, all those nights in the burn unit when I wanted to give up. I think some part of me knew there was more to the story, that I couldn't die until I knew the truth. And now you know. Now I know, she agreed. And I know that Robert Morrison is going to spend the rest of his life trying to make up for what he did. That's his choice, his burden to carry. I'm done carrying it for him. The front door opened and we heard footsteps in the hallway. A moment later, Jason appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his face drawn with exhaustion and something that might have been regret. Hello, Mom, he said quietly. Dad. Christine and I exchanged glances. This was the first time we'd seen our son since Thanksgiving, though we'd heard about his life falling apart through the local gossip network. Jason, Christine said neutrally. How are you? Divorced, he said with a bitter laugh. Unemployed, living in a studio apartment downtown. How do you think I'm doing? I think you're learning that choices have consequences, Christine replied. The same lesson I learned in that burn unit 28 years ago. Jason flinched. I deserved that. Yes, you did. He stood in the doorway for a moment, seemingly unsure of whether he was welcome. Finally, Christine gestured to the empty chair across from her. Sit down, she said. Tell me what you've learned. Jason sat down heavily, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I learned that Lily was recording our conversations too, he said. For months, she had files on both of you. Psychological profiles, strategies for isolating me from the family. She'd been planning this campaign from the very beginning. I know, Christine said. Her lawyer tried to use some of those recordings in the divorce proceedings. It didn't work out well for her. She's moved back to Minneapolis, Jason continued. Her father's old business connections helped her get a job there. She says she's starting over, building a new life away from all the drama. Good for her, Christine said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. Everyone deserves a chance to start over. Even me? Jason asked, and his voice cracked like a teenager's. Christine studied her son's face for a long moment. He looked broken, humbled, genuinely remorseful in a way that 3 months ago I wouldn't have thought possible. That depends, she said finally. Why are you here, Jason? Because I want to understand, he said. I want to understand how I became the kind of person who could laugh at his mother's scars. I want to understand how I let someone manipulate me into betraying my own family. And what have you figured out? Jason was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I figured out that I was ashamed of you, he said. Not because of anything you did, but because I was weak. Because it was easier to blame you for making my life complicated than it was to stand up for what was right. Christine's expression didn't change, but I saw her grip my hand a little tighter. I figured out that Lily didn't make me cruel, Jason continued. She just gave me permission to be the cruel person I already was inside. She made it seem logical, justified, even noble to cut you out of our lives. And now? Now I understand that cruelty is a choice, he said. And I chose it every single time I let her hurt you. Every time I laughed at her jokes about your appearance. Every time I made excuses for why we couldn't visit. Every time I chose my comfort over your dignity. Tears were streaming down his face now, and for the first time in months, he looked like the little boy I'd raised rather than the stranger he'd become. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. I'm not even asking for another chance, because I know some things can't be undone. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I lost, what I threw away, what I destroyed with my selfishness and cowardice." Christine was quiet for a long time, studying her son's face. Finally, she reached across the table and touched his hand. "Jason," she said softly, "do you know what the doctors told me during my recovery?" He shook his head. "They told me that the worst damage wasn't to my skin," she said. "It was to my heart. They said that burn survivors often struggle more with emotional healing than physical healing, that learning to trust people again, to believe that you're worthy of love despite your scars, is the hardest part of recovery." She paused, her thumb tracing across his knuckles. "For 28 years I believed I was unlovable because of how I looked. I believed that anyone who claimed to care about me was either lying or would eventually abandon me when they got tired of dealing with my damage." "Mom, let me finish," she said gently. 3 months ago, you proved that belief correct. You showed me exactly what I'd always feared, that even my own son would choose appearance over love, image over family." Jason's face crumpled, but Christine continued. "But you also gave me something I never expected," she said. "You gave me the chance to learn that I'm stronger than my fears, that I can survive losing everything again, that I don't need anyone's approval or acceptance to know my own worth." She looked directly into his eyes. "You broke my heart, Jason. But in breaking it, you also freed me from the prison of caring what other people think about my scars." "So, where does that leave us?" he asked. Christine was quiet for a moment, considering. "It leaves us with a choice," she said finally. "The same choice I had to make in that burn unit. We can let this destroy us, or we can use it to become something stronger." "What does that mean?" "It means that if you want to be my son again, you're going to have to earn it," Christine said. "Not through apologies or grand gestures, but through consistent actions over time. It means proving that you've actually changed, not just learned better excuses." She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden she'd been tending since we moved to this house. "I'm starting a support group for burn survivors," she said, "meeting every Tuesday night at the community center. People who've been through what I've been through, dealing with the stares, the questions, the assumption that we're broken or damaged." She turned back to face Jason. "If you want to understand what your mother's life has really been like, you can start by volunteering to help with that group. You can learn what it means to see people for who they are instead of what they look like." "I'd like that," Jason said quickly. "I'd like to help." "Good," Christine said, "because it's going to be hard work. These people have been hurt by family members who couldn't handle their appearance. They've been abandoned, rejected, told their burdens." "Sound familiar?" Jason nodded, understanding the parallel. "It's going to take time," Christine continued. "Maybe years. There's no guarantee that you'll ever be the son I thought I raised, or that I'll ever be able to trust you the way I used to. But if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to prove that you've actually learned something from this experience—" "I am," Jason said. "I want to try." Christine walked back to the table and sat down across from her son. For the first time in months, she smiled at him. Not the polite, careful smile she'd worn for 3 years, but the genuine, warm smile of a mother who still loved her child despite everything that had happened. "Then we'll try together," she said, "one day at a time." As I watched my wife and son begin the long work of rebuilding their relationship, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would go back to the way it was, but the stronger hope that comes from facing hard truths and choosing to grow from them. Christine was right. Some choices couldn't be undone, but some wounds, even the deepest ones, could heal if you were brave enough to do the work. Outside our kitchen window, the winter sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red that reminded me of fire. But this time, the fire looked like transformation rather than destruction, like the promise of something better rising from the ashes of what had been lost. Christine reached for my hand across the table, her scarred fingers intertwining with mine, and for the first time in years our family felt whole. Not perfect, not unchanged, but whole. And sometimes whole is enough.